Hello and welcome. I'm Lorianne Lumby with Authentic Freedom Academy, and this is our weekly Friday spiritual service. Today is Friday, March 5th, 2021. So before we begin, let's take a few moments to allow ourselves to draw ourselves into this space. So I invite you to begin by closing your eyes. And to draw your awareness to the sensation of your body, seated in the chair or couch or on the floor where you are seated. Feeling that connection between your physical form and that sense of being held, that sense of being supported and upheld. Allowing your mind to focus its awareness and attention on that place of connection. Maintaining that focus on connection as you allow yourself to breathe in and breathe out. Breathing in and breathing out. Allowing that attention on connection to bring you into a peaceful, quiet space. And entering into that space with your own personal intention for taking this time out of your busy life to tend to your own journey, to tend to your own need for nourishment, support, community, and connection. And we'll just rest for a few moments in that silence as we allow ourselves to fully arrive and ground ourselves here. From that place of attentive connection, I invite us to listen to these words from the book of Exodus. The whole congregation of the Israelites set out from Elim, and Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. The whole congregation of the Israelites complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, where we sat by the flesh pots and ate our fill of bread. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and each day the people shall go out and gather enough for that day. In that way I will test them, whether they will follow my instructions or not." In the morning, there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the layer of dew lifted, there on the surface of the wilderness was a fine, flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as each of you needs, an omer to a person, according to the number of persons, all providing for those in their own tents." The Israelites did so, some gathering more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, those who gathered much had nothing over, and those who gathered little had no shortage. They gathered as much as they needed. They gathered as much as each of them needed. And Moses said to them, "Let no one leave any of it over until morning." But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it until the morning, and it bred worms and became foul. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning, they gathered it, as much as each needed. But when the sun grew hot, it melted away. The house of Israel called it manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and the taste of it was like wafers made with honey. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a habitable land. They ate manna until they came to the border of the land of Canaan. As I sat in preparation for today's gathering and in reflection on where we've been and where we might be going, the phrase that kept coming up over and over and over was 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years in the wilderness. And I knew that this was related to the Exodus story. So this morning I Googled 40 years into Bible Gateway, where I get my scripture readings, and voila, this is what came up. And whether we're looking at this Exodus story, whether we're looking at our life from a microcosmic or macrocosmic perspective, this Exodus story is infinite and eternal. And it provides the perfect metaphor for not only where we seem to be as a collective moving through this process of human evolution, at least I hope that's what we're doing, or whether we look at this story through the lens of our own personal life experience, our own personal evolution. This story bears deep and profound truths and reminders of what to be attentive to and open and aware of as we continue on this journey. from a collective standpoint, we've been speaking for quite some time about this idea of human evolution and the hope, the dream, the vision that we are moving away from 5,000 years or more of patriarchal oppression and into a different kind of world, one that is more loving, more kind, more celebrating of diversity, more accepting, more whole, more unified, more equal. And I know for myself personally, I hold that hope in my heart and I carry it in my prayers. And there are days when I wonder, is this ever actually going to happen? Are we going to see this in our lifetime? Or are human beings just jerks? And this is what the human experience is always going to be like. And I do not profess to know the answer to that. And I will not blow smoke up people's asses or make promises that I don't know if they will or will not be fulfilled. And yet, what carries us in our human experience is hope that someday we might find a way as a species to live together in love, compassion, and wholeness. I continue to hold on to that hope because I do believe that human beings are capable of this if we put our minds and hearts to it. I do believe that human beings have the power within themselves to create a better and kinder and gentler world. And there are hints and glimpses of this transformation taking place. Not too long ago, we were brought, sexual abuse in Hollywood was brought to our attention, especially through the stories of Harvey Weinstein. Moving from Weinstein, we had an opportunity to see a glimpse into the reality of child sex trafficking in the person of Jeffrey Epstein and others who have been involved in those horrifying things. Today, and I've been hearing more and more of this, is the unraveling and the truth-telling of the Britney Spears stories and all the ways in which this young woman was groomed, treated as a sex object, inappropriately propositioned by some old, some younger, white men when she was very young, and men who should know better, but who have been allowed to continue to act in these misogynistic ways because of a culture that tends to look the other way. I had the profound opportunity gift this week to watch two films that showed what was happening 50 years ago. And in that viewing has given us an opportunity to look at where we've come. The first was the trial of the Chicago 7. The second one was the movie The Glorias. The trial of the Chicago Seven was involving protests that took place at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in the late 1960s, and which erupted into the same kind of violence that we saw with George Floyd and some of the other Black Lives Matter protests that happened across the nation last year. People that were trying to meet peacefully, trying to gather peacefully, and who were assaulted and antagonized by legal authorities, brutalized by legal authorities. And then it was the victims that were put on trial. The Glorias portrays the unfolding life of Gloria Steinem, pioneer and way shower in the women's movement, along with an army of women of all color, all backgrounds, all educations, all life experiences, trying to bring forth, trying to highlight the injustices that have been brought against women and try to create equal rights for women, tried to condemn sexual harassment in the workplace, brought forth programs for childcare so that single mothers could work, and spoke at length about reproductive rights and advocated for other rights of women. In watching these movies, part of me was like, man, nothing's changed in 50 years. We're still facing the same difficulties, the same challenges, the same sexism, the same misogyny, the same racial inequalities, the same oppression, the same levels of poverty and discrimination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, it's not the same. In the course of the last 50 years, many positive things have happened. Incremental changes have been made. And as we look at the unravelings of the last 12 to 18 months, we see that this journey continues. Slowly, painfully, two steps forward, one step back. Moments of joy and excitement and celebration, followed by times of disappointment and despair. The very real situation from a macrocosmic collective perspective is that change takes time. And herein comes the relevance to this Exodus reading. 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years in the wilderness. For 40 years, the Israelites wandered in a foreign land with nothing that they were familiar with, comfortable with, acquainted with. There was no map. They didn't even know where they were going or how they're supposed to get there or how long it would take to get there. And there have been great, wise anthropologists and sociologists who have pointed out that, well, of course they needed to wander for 40 years because a generation needed to pass so that they could forget and move away from the things of the old and what they once knew, be cleansed and released and purged from former habits and experiences and understandings of how life should be, to be brought into ultimately a state of innocence, of emptiness, of understanding that for something new to come in, they had to be made empty. And in all likelihood, some people had to die. Perhaps the old rule, if you will. Additionally, in that journey, they had to be open to the unexpected, to surprises, to things that were foreign and unfamiliar. They had to be willing to be curious and to try something they'd never tried before, like this strange nourishment found in the mornings on the desert floor. In addition to that curiosity, they also had to embrace a kind of present moment attention, present moment awareness, present moment action. So there was wisdom in the divine providing for them, but only providing enough for one day. And what was provided could not be held over to the following day because it would be ruined. So in the morning, they awoke, they found what they needed for the day, they used what they found for the day, went to bed, and waited for the next day to begin again. In that, they also were forced to practice trust. They began by grumbling. Why did you make us leave Egypt? Why did you send us out into this desert? We could be in Egypt enjoying our flesh pots and getting fed, even though we were slaves. But we knew it, and it was familiar, but at least we knew we'd be fed. In that grumbling, or their grumbling was responded to with a present moment answer. You will be provided for this day. And they would have to go to sleep trusting that they also would be provided for the next day. But they didn't get to hoard or collect or save their things for that next day. They had to step into that day and receive what was given. So this is our invitation at this point in our journey, is number one, to not get too hung up on the collective. There's not much we can do to hasten this collective march towards human evolution or to make it happen. But we can do what we need to do for ourselves. We can say no to that which doesn't serve. We can call out and confront injustice and oppression when we see it. We can take action where action is possible. And we can support ourselves in our own evolution, our personal evolution. taking the risk of trusting that this day will be provided for. Being open and curious to what that provision might look like. Being willing to receive and to try something new. And to be patient. Patient in knowing that all things are serving the highest good. And everything that comes into our space, our awareness, our experience, is in support of our own personal journey. And being grateful for that when it arrives. And I want to close this reflection with the card that I pulled for our gathering today from my Kali Oracle deck. And this is the card that I pulled. It is Kali Kalmasa Nasini. And this is what she says to us. Kali Kalmasa Nasini devours darkness with her endless hunger for light, peace, and redemption. She reaches the deepest places, the darkest spaces, relentless in her pursuit of the lost and despairing. No soul shall ever be forgotten, abandoned, or betrayed by her. Those that believe in their own guilt, their sin, their shame, evoke her mighty tenderness, and she feasts upon the darkness that threatens to consume them, alleviating the weight of their suffering, allowing their hearts to become light and free. The name Kali Kalmasa Nasini translates as she who consumes sin. She destroys ill intent. She eradicates mistakes. Here is Kali as the supreme divine weapon. She is the archer and the arrow. She is the divine mind unleashed, so it shall raise anything built on negative foundations and who vanquishes all evil. Hers is the power of Pashupatrastra. This is a Sanskrit word which refers to the ultimate spiritual weapon. It has the capacity to neutralize every other weapon in the universe. This divine weapon shall be unleashed in numerous ways, whether its power is delivered by arrow or sword, or a release of a thought, glance, or sound from the divine mind. Its action is unequivocal and swift. In the blink of an eye, something once considered as solid as a rock is reduced to nothing.